Chapter 2, The Call. I woke up the next day realizing I dreamed about that tree again. This time my view was further out, and I could see tombstones in the background, as if it were on the edge of a cemetery. I got dressed and headed in to start the day, wondering what the cars that I will soon be seeing on the highway be up to. I looked down at my work cell phone the town had given me to see no missed calls. Every once in a while, I'll call my personal phone from my work phone just to make sure it still works. I followed the school bus as it made its rounds to pick up the kids and carry them off to school, making sure impatient motorists don't pass them as it's loading up kids with the stop sign out. I'm not sure why, but the last stop the bus makes in town is on one side of the highway. When it's picking up a kid from the opposite side, I'll get in the middle of the highway and turn my lights on and bring traffic to a stop to make sure he gets across the highway and onto his bus. The bus was all loaded up and it headed down the highway out of town. Every once in a while, the bus driver and some parents will complain to me about a fight breaking out on the bus. I really dread those. Because the parents don't realize that if I were to talk to the bullies starting these fights, it's only going to encourage them to do it more. I always advise them to express their concerns with the school, as the state's attorney won't file for charges on school kids. As I started to drive away, my work cell phone rang. It surprised me as I hardly ever hear that ringtone. I could only guess it was a parent, and a fight broke out already. And one of the kids called their mothers, "Hatcher Pass Police Department, this is Officer Ray." I heard a lady crying on the other side of the line before she spoke and said,
My baby didn't come home.
the crying alone caught me off guard, and trying to understand her words, being masked by the sobbing, made it difficult. "Ma'am, what's your address so I can talk to you in person, as I take these calls very seriously?" All I could hear was more sobbing for a moment before she said,
74719 Grapevine.
I told her I was on my way. When I arrived, she was waiting for me sitting down on her front steps. With her head in her hands still crying, I approached her and asked what was going on. She took a moment to collect her words and dry her face before looking up at me and said,
My baby, and I got into it. She never came home last night. I couldn't wait 24 hours to say something.
I told her I was glad she didn't, and it isn't necessary to wait 24 hours to report someone missing. She continued by saying her baby, Haley, 14, never got off the bus last night. She thought Haley needed time to cool down and thought she stayed with a friend last night. But when she called that friend's mother to see if Haley got on the bus this morning, she said Haley never came over. I tried to comfort her, assuring her it was a misunderstanding, and Haley must have stayed with another friend. Or the guidance counselor at the school may have made arrangements. With Haley being 14, I doubted that, but I know Carrie, the mother, needed to hear possibilities of any good news right now. I asked Carrie of Haley's friends so I could call them all and see if they had seen her. Carrie continued crying, saying she doesn't have their phone numbers. I told Carrie not to worry, I can get them, it's not hard to do. I asked Carrie what the disagreement was over. Carrie looked down at my feed and off to the side. She dodged the question and went on to tell me that
Haley was growing up like pretty much any 14-year-old girl would. She loves sunflowers and socializing, and up until a few weeks ago, she started taking a turn. She stopped wearing her normal clothes and cut out time with her friends. She became more distant and quieter. When I asked Haley about this change, Haley would shrug it off and grew defensive.
Carrie went on to explain that Haley went from being an honor student to neglecting her studies and falling behind to a C student. Carrie told me that her best friend, who she was hoping Haley stayed last night with, Cassandra, told her mother when Carrie called that Haley had not been at her house in a few days. I probably should have avoided Carrie from saying this, because I could see her eyes water up again after a short break from crying. I told Carrie to try and relax, and I'll be right back. It was impossible to get a cell phone signal on that area of Grapevine, and it was a good thing she had a landline to make the call. I headed down the road just enough to get a signal. I called the school and spoke with Principal Landry. Principal Landry told me she would check the video footage from the school bus and check with Haley's teachers to see who had last seen Haley. I told Principal Landry I would be anxiously awaiting her phone call, and she told me she'd call me back as soon as she learned something. I drove back to Carrie's house and asked for some information on Haley. I think Carrie was calming down a little. I think she was more nervous. I wouldn't take a missing persons call so soon, and she'd have to wait until later tonight. The more we talked, the more she calmed down and found a sense peace. Carrie told me Haley's father was never in the picture, and Carrie and Haley were all each other had. She told me she never had any other children and her parents passed away shortly before Haley was born. I exchanged phone numbers with Carrie and told her I'd stay in touch and would get back with her as soon as possible and headed for the school. I arrived at the school and tracked down Principal Landry. I apologized to her about not waiting any longer and said this case may be a little more serious than I had expected. Principal Landry said she was on her way to the administration offices to check the video surveillance footage for Haley getting off a bus. Principal Landry informed me she also had Haley's class schedule with the teachers' names. Great. We should actually get somewhere and know where to start. Surely one of these teachers saw Haley last. I volunteered to speak with the high school teachers while Principal Landry went to investigate bus footage to save on time. I started with Haley's last class of the day, Mr. Sando with civics. He wasn't too happy that I pulled him aside during class. I quickly mentioned that one of his students had gone missing and I felt like this couldn't wait. His tone changed pretty quickly and said, Haley did not show up for class yesterday. I kept tracking down each teacher and pulling them aside until I got to Haley's fourth period class, Mrs. Go with biology. Mrs. Go confirmed Haley was in her class yesterday. She went on saying Haley used to be one of her top students until recently when she stopped during her homework and her grades started falling. Mrs. Go told me that Haley used to always have a smile on her face and was in a good mood, but had not seen that smile in a few weeks. She went on to say that she was going to talk with Haley and see what was going on before her grade fell to be too bad. Mrs. Go asked if Haley was okay. I hope so, I replied. I walked back to the administration's office where I met with Principal Landry. I could tell she did not have the news I was hoping for by the expression on her face.
I don't know what happened, but I looked at footage from yesterday from Haley's bus and it was all static. I'm not sure why that is, because when the cameras aren't working, they show a blue screen, not static.
I said, That's okay. I don't believe she was on the bus. The last class anyone had seen Haley was fourth period. Are students allowed to leave school grounds for lunch? Principal Landry informed me that only if they have a permit which requires permission from a parent, which Haley does not have, I can check video footage from inside the school and track Haley. But it may take some time because there's quite a few cameras on school grounds. I told Principal Landry I understood and if she could call Cassandra into the office for a quick interview.
Cassandra Evans to the principal's office, please. Cassandra Evans.
I hate to put anyone on blast like that in front of a crowd. I'm not trying to embarrass them or anything, but it's needed. There was a knock on the door, and Cassandra was escorted in with a terrified look on her face. Before I could say anything, Cassandra asked if it was about Haley. Yes, I said, we haven't seen her since yesterday. I believe you're a good friend of hers and was wondering if you could tell me what is going on. Cassandra looked down at her feet before saying,
I haven't seen her in 2 days. I don't know what happened to her, but she's not the same person I call my best friend.
I asked her, what do you mean? Cassandra told me.
I don't know. I begged her to tell me what was going on, but she always pushed me away. We used to be best friends. She started changing a few weeks ago. I don't know where she is. I just want my best friend back.
Was there any talk of her spending last night with you?
No, Haley hadn't slept over in weeks.
I asked, who are Haley's other friends? Cassandra told me Haley got along with everyone, but was not as close to anyone as they once were. Last question, Cassandra. Do you know where Haley is at right now?
No, or I would be with her right now. I just want my friend back.
Cassandra began crying again, and I could tell she was being sincere. She lost a best friend, and I fear this is worse than what I've been denying it to be. Nothing ever happens in this small town, right? I drove back to town and sent a memo to the sheriff's office informing them of the situation and everything I had learned. It wasn't long before a deputy called me to confirm someone in the county had actually gone missing.
Nothing ever happens in our county, and now we get this.
Deputy Runnels asked. I know, it hit me like a brick, I answered. I told Runnels I am going to forward this to the news outlet and get word out there. Surely someone knows something. It didn't take long. The next morning, when I arrived at the police station, there was a news van waiting for me. I walked inside and met with the village clerk and a news reporter. My office is in the same building as the water, village clerk, and mayor's office. I couldn't make it to my office before the reporter rushed me and hammered me with questions on Haley's disappearance. I told the reporter I'm checking for emails, waiting to hear back from the school to see if they were able to get Haley on camera. I have a long road ahead of me, and it's best I follow with the leads I have right now before it's too late, I told the reporter as I walked into my office and shut the door behind me. I was really starting to feel the pressure on providing answers to what was going on. I received multiple emails from concerned parents from throughout town if they should be worried if their kid was next. Finally, I located the one email I needed to read, and it was from Principal Landry. It was short, and all it said was, "Call me ASAP." I figured this is really good or really bad. No in between. I called Principal Landry and she answered on the first ring. Before I could say hello, she said,
I don't know what it is, but we were never able to get Haley on any camera. Static everywhere.
I asked, "Oh, what do you mean?" Landry said,
We followed the cameras in between Haley's classes. When she was supposed to be walking from one class to another, the camera in her area would fade to static. It makes zero sense.
Just like that, my one and only lead to follow up on was completely useless. I wanted to shout at Landry and say one of her students goes missing under her watch, and her security equipment is useless and complete trash. But I had to hold it together knowing the reporter was right outside my door, attempting eavesdrop with a recorder looking for the tiniest bit of information to run off of and scare everyone in their listening area. Instead, I confused Landry by saying, "Thank you, that's what I needed to hear," and hung up the phone. I walked out past the reporter who was determined in knowing what my new lead was. I looked at her as I walked out and said I can't let them know what my next move was. Probably not the answer she was looking for, but she was the least of my worries. I emailed Principal Landry from my work phone, asking for addresses of school students and employees that lived in town. The county sheriff's office was finalizing to push an Amber Alert through for Haley. Principal Landry emailed me back of all school students and employees. Small town, small county, small school. I forwarded the registry to the sheriff's office, asking if they could follow up with anyone on the list that lived outside of town and within the county. There were only 19 addresses in town, and I planned on visiting every single one of them. My enthusiasm soon wore out. After visit number 5, I kept receiving the same answer of, "I've seen her around, but never talked to her since we're not in the same grade." A couple of houses I received no answer. It was the end of my shift, and I had 2 houses to go. I was too invested into this. I could not go home and act like everything was okay. One was a teacher, and the other was the school custodian. I figured I'd try the teacher first since she was closest. I knocked on the door, and Mrs. Klein answered. She seemed happy to see me and invited me, and Mrs. Klein, little did I know, was the special education teacher. She told me she never had the opportunity to speak with or teach Haley, and apologized that she was of no help. I thanked her for her time and told her I was off to see one last person today. She asked who that would be, and I almost said the custodian, Reyes, but figured I should stay quiet about it. I trusted her. But I also know looks can be deceiving. I told her it was one of the students in a different grade to throw her off. Hopefully, she doesn't know I already spoke with him. I made my way off towards Grapevine, getting eerie vibes. I pulled up to Reyes's house and knocked on the door. The door cracked open ever so slightly, and Reyes peeked through and said,
"What do you want?"
I replied, "Hello, sir, I'm off."
"I know who you are. I asked, what are you doing here?"
I was caught a little off guard why he felt the need to shout, and simply said, "I'm just following up on Haley's disappearance." Reyes looked at me and was quite agitated and said,
"She's not here. Go away."
as he slammed the door. I stood there for a moment and yelled just loud enough for him to hear me through the door. "I never said she was here. I was just wondering if you've ever talked to her. It is a bit odd you'd mentioned that before I brought it up." I was expecting to get a reaction from Rose, or better yet, have him come back to the door and restart a conversation. Instead, Rouse shouted,
"Go away!"
through the door. 19 houses, and not one of them lead me to believe of any suspicions, except for the last one. I walked back to my patrol car and headed home. As I laid in bed that night, I had Reyes on my radar and was planning what my next move should be. Realizing it was a Friday night and Reyes wouldn't be back to work until Monday morning, I began plotting how I'd spend the weekend to be as productive as possible. I also realized it's been a while since I last took a day off. Thinking to myself now is not a good time for it. Even though I could use it, I was getting mentally exhausted. I had no answers for concerned parents, wondering if their children were next. The news must have known by now I had nothing. The next morning, I was awakened by my alarm clock. I felt like I had a decent sleep, but was confused. I couldn't remember what I had dreamed of last night. Normally, I remember as soon as I wake up. It's not like me to have to remember. As I drove to the police station, it hit me like a freight train. I looked off to the side of the road and saw a ditch, and remembered my dream was looking at a motorcycle that had crashed into a ditch. No one was around, similar to dreaming about the tree. A few nights before that, I walked into my office and decided the emails from concerned parents needed to be addressed. I emailed each one of them back, assuring them that Hatcher Pass was safe and their children were fine. After going through each email, I realized I had absolutely zero leads remaining on Haley. Yet Reyes was on my radar. I contacted the sheriff's office and Deputy Runnels answered. We exchanged our findings and information. Deputy Runnels told me he and another deputy went door to door and still had some houses left on the list. I told Deputy Runnels about Rios, and he got quiet.
Is that the shady guy that lives out in the sticks? The hermit who doesn't want anything to do with anyone?
I believe that's him, I answered. I went on to tell Runnels about my encounter with him yesterday and how odd it was. Runnels told me he had never had any encounters with him while on the job, but had a few run-ins with him at the school. Runnels told me was aware Reyes was the school's custodian and always kept to himself. He's never seen Reyes speak to anyone and wondered why someone like that would be working around kids. I agreed with him and told Runnels I need to check more into him. Deputy Runnels told me Rios would never look at him whenever he would pass through and was always working. I told Deputy Runnels I need to check into Rios, and Deputy Runnels cut me off by saying,
Done. I ran his criminal history and he's clean.
that there's definitely more to Rios that we need to know about. I told Deputy Runnels